Hello, today we are meeting Diarmuid and we'll be talking about the applications of tobacco and a little bit about the history maybe about this herb. So Diarmuid, tell me please, what are your experiences with this plant?
Okay, so I have both positive and negative experiences with the plant. Like many people, I had a habit of smoking conventional cigarettes for a while. So in that sense, because of how those that tobacco product is created, the intention behind it, and the reason for its production, I think that was probably the main reason it's unhealthy. So everyone's familiar with that, this idea of tobacco and smoking being bad for you. It's a very prevalent idea in the culture, and for the most part it's correct. Very damaging to the organism and I think to the psyche too. So I used to smoke and I don't anymore. That's a simple bad experience. The positive experience I've had with tobacco is in its use as a herb. So you correctly call it a herb. It's a healing herb, like many other we have around us. So what's important about tobacco, I think, is its strength, its potency. It's a very strong plant. I'm not sure if this is true, but there's an idea purported by David Wolfe that it's the most mineral-rich plant on the planet, so that it absorbs more minerals and nutrients from the soil than any other plant. Anyway, it's been used as a medicine for a long time, before the Europeans got to the Americas. I think most of the cultures who had that plant growing in their environment used it for various different medicinal, they used it for many different reasons. So it's probably its most important function is as what's described as an antibiotic. It's a bit of a strange name because antibiotic means anti-life, but it really refers to its ability to kill microorganisms, so certain types of bacteria and so on. Nicotine, which is the again, this is a very brief skimming on the top of this subject. I have very little experience with it. The reason I'm here is just to maybe get you interested in tobacco and to explore it yourself. So nicotine seems to be the most important element of the plant, though there's probably other important elements also. It's a poison. So if you consume enough nicotine, you'll die, and that's also, I suppose, its benefit. Most of a human being, what we consider a human being, is mostly bacteria. Bacteria have their own DNA, they're single-celled organisms, and they're generally much smaller. So the reason we look the way we look is because the human cells we have, though they're less, are bigger. So we have more bacteria cells, but they're smaller. And there's different numbers being kind of bandied about. Numbers vary from like 10 to 1, 9 to 1, 90% bacteria, 10% human, some massively disproportionate amount of bacteria cells in comparison to human cells. A quick Google and you'll be able to see lots of resources on this. And so these bacteria, what's also interesting about the research that's being done at the moment is that this idea that the bacteria influence our consciousness, our way of thinking, and our behavior is now being accepted by mainstream science. In fact, mainstream science is providing a lot of very interesting and intriguing results, ideas at the moment. So my thinking about bacteria and tobacco is that because of the way we live a very sanitized life. People, Europeans and Americans, and I suppose the richest people in the world live a very sanitized life. And this is good in one aspect and bad in another aspect. and the use of antibiotics and the whole cultural idea about what's dirty and what's clean, and bacteria itself. We see advertisements on TV, everything's about killing bacteria, but the reality is that we need bacteria. Without bacteria we couldn't live. We need certain types of bacteria, and we certainly don't need other types of bacteria. Anyway, I'm kind of going off. The point is that my understanding is that if you have certain bacterial colonies in your gut, they will affect your consciousness, and for the negative. Tobacco is something that kills those, and that's what I believe. I believe that that's why it's so important in traditional medicine, and that's why they're using it in ayahuasca ceremonies. It's common to have the curandero blow tobacco on your head or in different parts of your body. Some of you might have experienced that. There's somebody who is proficient using ayahuasca as a healing medicine is referred to as an ayahuasquero, and then you have tabaqueros who are mainly focused on using tobacco as their main healing plant. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling. This is my understanding of it, that it influences the bacterial colonies, which influences your brain. And
okay, what are your experiences in South America?
Okay, my experience in South America with tobacco, again, admittedly, they're very limited, but because of the strength of the experience I've had with tobacco, I really value it. I think it's a really important plant and a very misunderstood plant too. My experiences were mostly of having it used in ayahuasca ceremonies, so experiencing it that way. In Europe, in fact, in Ireland, I had the experience of drinking tobacco, which is a very... It's not a psychedelic experience in the way that we did it. It's a very difficult experience. It's a very gut, base level experience. Tobacco juice is disgusting to drink, probably because of the nicotine. It's very difficult to hold in your gut, and so the idea behind the ceremony that I attended was that you drink the tobacco juice and you hold it in as long as you can, and then at the point that you can't anymore, you purge. So the experience post purging is a very calm, very centered, very clear-minded, very beautiful grounding experience. Now, I've also taken it by myself with tobacco that I got from South America, and this was slightly different, just experimenting. So the portion I took of it was, I don't know how much it was, I can't remember, but I can remember, again, this feeling of being very, very, very physically, I don't want to say sick because I wasn't vomiting, but very physically compromised, with no power, you feel overtaken by it, and then very unusual by comparison to something like psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca. Very unusual, and a different category of visual stimulus afterwards. That probably not so important. This idea of cleansing at a very deep and instant level, I think, is where it's powerful.
Physical.
Yeah, physical. So it's a very grounding, very simple, in my experience, which is very limited. But it's something I think necessary for people who are interested in, I suppose, what's called spirituality, stuff that's outside of the common consensus, that there's a tendency to go very beyond and to be very ungrounded. I know I have been in my life, and so tobacco is something that brings you back to the here and now. And very simple. It's not a very mind thing. It's a very, very gut level centering thing. Yeah.
And who are tabaqueros?
Tabaqueros, as far as I know, in my experience, is somebody who has given a lot of their life and their time to consuming the plant, to relating with the plant, and to, if we go by what they say, learning what the plant tells them. So or teaches them rather. Tabaquero would be somebody who is proficient. Like, I'm not a tabaquero anywhere close. A tabaquero would be somebody who knows how to use the plant and help people with the plant, and has respect for the plant. So yeah.
And if you would compare tabaquero with other kinds of shamans, how would you compare these people? They are
It's a good question.
close to ground, or they can contact other dimensions?
Yeah, you know, I suppose everybody is different. So there's a lot of shamanism is a strange term that we use for anybody who uses plants or altered states of consciousness to produce some type of result, healing, or to get information. My experience with people who refer to themselves as shamans or curanderos is that it's very different with each person. Is there a characteristic that distinguishes somebody who uses one plant as opposed to another? I'm really not qualified to say, because my experience with tobacco has been with pretty mid-level, maybe technician is not the right word, but mid-level practitioners who use a lot of different plants. There's a guy who the last time I was in Peru, the last and the only time I was in Peru, I was looking for a tabaquero. And when I say looking, I was contacting people who I felt might know about who would be the best person to go to, and I had plans to go. I was in the Andes, so I had plans to go to the jungle. And for various different reasons, my health especially, I chose not to go to the jungle. But the name that kept coming up from different places was a guy called Ernesto in Iquitos. And at that time, there was no YouTube videos about him. And now there's a couple on the internet. The guy, I have no experience with the guy, only from what I've heard from other people. I've seen a couple of short YouTube videos. It's hard to say, really, you know. The two Spanish guys that I spoke to who work with, one Spanish guy who works with Ernesto, who's in Iquitos at the moment. I spoke with him on Skype, and my impression, having met a lot of people over the course of 20 years, it was that he was a sincere and kind and real person. And when I asked him about his experience with it, he just said it's a very much a plant that brings you into the here and now. So yeah, that's what I can say.
Okay, so thank you for sharing with us some knowledge about tobacco.
No problem, my pleasure.
Thank you.